We're now like dressing the Prime Minister and the Governor General, Beyonce,
Demi Lovato, Mariah Carey,
President Barack Obama. Having that shut down and having those doors closed in the beginning was good. What seemed like failures at the time was great because we had to think outside the box.
Ko Kiri Nathan, tētahi o ngā tohunga whatu kākahu, whatu kōrero anō hoki. A kua whakamānoatia aia, i runga noi te mahara kua whakawhiwhia ia ki te tohu a Blake i te tau 2021 maiwa. Engari, e harai te mea ko te hua kākahu nahe tāna e whai ana, ko te whakatina nā no i ngā āwhero o ngā mātua tūpuna, te whainga matua. Ko ia nei te kōrero e pāna ki tēnei au mangea o te ao whatu kākahu. Ko Kiri Nathan, Indigenous 100. Kiri Nathan, tēnā koe.
Kia ora.
Thank you very much for being a part of Indigenous 100.
Thank you for inviting me.
I want to take your mind back to, I think it's the 31st of October, 2018, o hene mutu, tamata kapua whare, when Harry and Meghan are being pōhirido on to tamata kapua by Te Arawa. And Meghan in particular, probably the most photographed woman in the world, is wearing a taonga from Kiri Nathan. What were you thinking at that time, that the most photographed couple and one of the most photographed people in the world is wearing a taonga by Kiri Nathan?
To be perfectly honest with you, the taonga is carved by my husband, Jason. So it's always a bit strange because my name is Kiri Nathan, but the label is Kiri Nathan. However, the artist was Jason. What I was personally thinking at that time was I wish that more whakaro and more kōrero was given to the weaver of the muka korowai that she was wearing as well, because I felt like all of the media that went out focused on that Pounamu and not so much on that beautiful Te Arawa weaver as well. So honestly, that's what I was thinking at the time. Oh, I wish people would give more whakaro or more kōrero to her and her beautiful mahi. So we posted and we did as much as we could to support her mahi. But it was lovely, and the way that happened was a lovely process through our Governor General, Dame Patsy Uri.
How did that happen?
So Dame Patsy commissioned 2 contemporary kākahu pieces that will be used to cloak any future women that are inducted as dames. And through that process, actually when she first asked me to come and meet with her, I took all the Pounamu because I thought she was wanting Pounamu, and she was actually after weaving. So in that meeting, she acquired a few pieces with the knowledge that the royals were coming and she wanted some koha to give them. And so she actually personally gifted that taonga to Meghan. And yeah, Meghan, we're on first name basis now.
When did you first know, though, that it was going to... Was it at that time that you knew it was going to Meghan? Or?
No, I didn't. They were a little bit hush-hush at the time during that hui, but Dame Patsy sent an email to me, I think, as they arrived. And then we were invited down to Governor House to sort of meet and greet with them personally, with a lot of other amazing Kiwis and local children and, tamariki and kura. And she was wanting to try and introduce me to her at that time to say that this is where the Pounamu came from. But it was funny when it got to that part of the night where everyone was able to go up and meet her, it just kind of went, whoo, and so I kind of went, ooh, and I stood right back. So, we never got to personally meet her and discuss that, but I felt like it happened the way that it was supposed to anyway.
Why did you stand back?
I just feel like you should always maintain yourself and not lose your dignity by trying to push through people to get to someone, because from my perspective, people are people, and you'll meet them when you're supposed to meet them, and not at the price of your mana.
Where does that come from? Where does that whakaaro or that thinking come from?
I think it's probably a lot of things. I went to Tamaki College in GI, and so one of the big things there was respect. Because if you didn't have respect for other people or where your place was or what you were doing, you got brought down to earth pretty quickly.
Is there a situation that happened at school that especially taught you that lesson?
No. I think it's just GI in general. You know, GI, with all its challenges and probably for outsiders looking in, it looks like your standard low socioeconomic housing corp area and all the rest of it. But for me, it was community, and it was when things probably weren't great at home, I had that outside community, which came from my best friends in my school and my sports communities. And those communities were always about being there for each other, loyalty, and also not being a fat head.
Tell me more about your childhood. You said that when things at home were challenging. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I had a little bit of an unorthodox upbringing. My father's Pākehā, my mum's Māori, and my dad was a professional speedway racer. So we spent 6 months of the year in Scotland and then 6 months of the year back at home for like the first 9 years of my life. I think I was 3 months old when we first went to Scotland, and we lived in a little place called Whitsun Hill in the middle of the country. I went to a school that had 20 pupils that came from the rural area around me, and we had, open fires, and it was an old brick cottage, hot meals for breakfast, lunch. You learned how to knit, how to write in Old English writing, and you played soccer every minute of the day. That was everything to them there. So I had that experience during childhood, and would walk half a mile to school and half a mile home through the country in Scotland. And then Dad, of course, every weekend, and sometimes during the week we'd be travelling all over Europe to different speedway meetings. And that wasn't as, it probably sounds a little bit glamorous, but it was more like hoons, loads and loads of hoons, going and racing against each other, exceptional sportsmen, and then just partying afterwards, hardcore partying, all kinds of partying. And then I would come home for the 6 months and go to a little Catholic school in GI, St. Pius, and back to all our whānau in GI and friends in GI. And so it was this real kind of strange mix, but it was awesome, and I was really, really lucky.
What were you thinking at the time? Because there's obviously a complete difference between being in Scotland and going to raceways and then coming back to GI. What was your thinking at the time, but going between these two worlds as a young child, I guess?
I think when you're a kid, whatever you're doing, you just think that that's how it is, that's kind of normal. I knew it wasn't normal to travel, especially when I came back to GI and nobody had even been on a plane and so forth. And again, like I said, it was a real privilege, and I didn't realise how much of a privilege until now, probably. And like we'd stop in Disneyland on the way back and things like that. So as a child from GI, that was not normal. However, there was other things that came with that were, I always put them down to good learning, really good learning. Because when we came back to New Zealand for the Speedway season, that's a whole education in itself. You go to Western Springs and, Dad's on, T-shirts and people, there's fans and all this kind of thing. And then, the signing of autographs and so forth. But all the kids of the races, we just hung out. We had a great childhood in that Western Springs Stadium and growing up there. And every Saturday, huge parties. The whole car park would be full of, super modifieds and midgets and TQs, whānau, all whānau. But the solos and the side chairs, they always stayed on the side because they were always the bad boys. They were all literally all descended from gangs and that kind of life as well. So there was kids, we were as young as, 5 or 6 up to probably 10 and 11. And there was bonfires everywhere, and we'd just run amok. And so there was a real sense of freedom in that, and a real naivety to the dangers of it. But it was really, really lots and lots of learning in that time.
So your heroes when you were growing up?
Speedway races. Yep, hardcore speedway races from all over the world.
Can you name me some? Did you meet them?
Yeah. No, they were all at the parties.
Yeah.
No, that was, so Mitch was a big one for me. Mitch Sheeran, I was just talking to you previously about Ivan Major, Ollie Olsen, and...
So, Ollie Olsen?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Ollie Olsen. I know. No, different.
Different Ollie, okay,
yeah,
good.
Danish Ollie Olsen. Yeah, world champ.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
he was incredible. Bruce Pennell. Yeah, they were just incredible sportsmen, and they were always really, really good to me and my whānau. So, yeah.
Was there anything in that kind of speedway upbringing, because it seems to me there might not be, but was there anything in that speedway upbringing and meeting those kind of heroes of yours as a child that gave you any experience or insight or anything that led you to what you're doing now, or was it just simply a different time in your life?
What I saw was total dedication and perseverance to their particular passion, unwavering. They'd put their bodies and their lives on the line to do something that they loved and were passionate about. I saw community and whānau that weren't whānau, and especially when you were away from home, the way that people came together and really, really, truly were there to tautoko each other, whether it was if someone was having a hard time, giving them some kai or whatever it was. That was really beautiful, and a real sense of loyalty that was really important to everyone.
What was that life like for your mother, bringing up kids?
Yeah, Mum's a creative, and Popo ran away from home, so Mum was brought up in GI, went to Tamaki College, all of them did, never travelled, and they were never taught the reo, and they were pretty much raised to think that they had to live in a Pākehā world and become Pākehā if they were going to succeed. So my mum was the eldest, and I think she took that lesson well and truly to heart, married Pākehā and really tried to go down that road. So the environment that she was in was so foreign to anything that she would have ever known in her life. There were no Māori, there were no Indigenous people at all. So that would have been very isolating. And also, even though Mum was from GI and there wasn't much, there was always whānau and people around. Whereas in Scotland, in the middle of nowhere, there weren't even friends. So Dad had his thing and Mum didn't. So I think Mum really struggled through those years. And my only sister, she was born in Scotland. So she also went through the process of birth and having a young baby with no whānau around. Yeah, so I think it was hard for Mum. And then a few years later, Dad went back by himself because she refused to go. She wanted to stay back here.
Stay in GI.
She wanted to stay back here. She actually stayed with my grandparents, who by that time had moved from GI to St Heliers. It's my dad's parents. She stayed with them and she went back and studied photography. So
she was the creative one?
Yes.
Is that where the inspiration comes from for you in terms of what you're doing now?
I think I always saw Mum start things, but Mum never really finished anything. So again, it's another lesson. And my mum always used to make clothes, but she never used to sort of do anything by the rules. So she'd just say, I want to make that. So she'd cut something out on the table, sew it up, and sometimes it would work. And most of the times, maybe not so much. I think she had a creative mind, but she wouldn't take the time to learn the skills and so forth properly. However, my grandmother, who's my dad's mum, she was a dressmaker like during the war, prior to the war actually. She got a job, she talked about it right till the day that she died. It was her favourite job in the world, and she had all these beautiful fabrics that were imported into New Zealand, and she would make them into beautiful dresses for this company that were in Queen Street, I think, at the time. And then the war happened, so all of the sewers had to go and make army uniforms. And I remember her just thinking, I just want to be working with these beautiful fabrics and so forth. But, everyone had to do their bit, and she was incredible at being that nurturer and provider for anyone that was around her, especially her children. And so she made all their clothes, you know, through the Depression and so forth. She would take Grandpa's old jeans and cut them up and make them into little pinafores or whatever for the 5 kids that she had. And she would make herself a new dress every Friday. Every Friday, like from a young girl. That was just something that she did for herself, and whether she got fabric, I don't know, old curtains or whatever, she would make them into something. And she always used a pattern, and she always took her time and sewed everything beautifully. So I remember sitting and watching her on her old Singer machine. You know, I'd sit there for hours, and she had a little sewing room in the house, and I'd just sit there at her feet, and it was a little bit like therapy. It was really, really calming, and I loved watching her make clothes. So she was a very strong influence, for me.
Do you think she knew that you were watching with potentially a lesson in this for you, and as an up-and-coming designer, fashion maker at that time? Yeah,
there's no doubt about it. She loved girls. She had 4 boys and 1 girl, and then all the moko were pretty much boys, and until myself and one cousin came along. So we were all brought up around garages and bikes and racing, and we were all racing at the age of 5 and so forth. So for her to have a girl or any granddaughters around, she loved that, and so she would always, for my birthday and Christmas, buy me some kind of creative thing like craft, or whether it was painting or sculpture or whatever it was. She was always trying to encourage that creative outlet. And for as long as I can remember, she did that. And even when we first started the business, and I think we were up to our 4th child, and, starting a business, and we'd just come out of the recession. That was not a good industry to go into, It was probably a really naive decision at the time. And my grandma was on a pension at the time, but she still managed to save up a bit of money and say, put this towards your business. You're gonna do good. You keep going. And so, I think she was just always there, encouraging.
What an amazing woman.
She was amazing.
Wow.
She was awesome.
Do you remember the first thing you made?
Yes.
You're laughing, so I suspect I know how this is going to go. Talk to us about it.
There's a couple of stages there. One was just cutting things out and hand sewing them up with needles and so forth from grandma's, bits and pieces, or mum's bits and pieces for teddy bears. People kept trying to buy me Barbie dolls, and I hated them. I used to break their legs off and arms off and throw them away. I was like, So there were racing teddies and things like that I would always get along the way, and I'd try and make clothes for them. They weren't too bad, in all fairness, but it was when, tech, when you're in Form 1 and Form 2, or what is that now, Year 7 and 8, you had to do sewing. And so you'd make your standard pencil case and pair of shorts. I was shocking. I was terrible, like absolutely terrible. And I really, really wanted to do well because I wanted to, be able to make clothes like grandma. And so persevered through college. And I remember my sewing teacher saying to me in 4th form, your sewing leaves so much to be desired. And I was like, oh, whatever. I was just like, I'll show you. And so just persevered. And now I can sew some stuff.
What does your 4th form teacher say now about
I'd love to see her. I would love to see her.
Did you have an inkling in Form 1 and 2 when you were doing tech class that this is what you wanted to do, what you wanted to be?
I think I always wanted to do something creative, and I didn't really work out what that was going to be until I started to make my own clothes for socials and stuff like that around the age of 15. And I did a little bit of, I wouldn't call it modelling, but it was kind of like that for a label called Shark Tea back in the day. And Shark Tea was owned and run by 2 Māori women, Kim Fraser and Maria Scully. And they won, the Smoke-Free Fashion Awards. They were creating garments, some with a Māori, like a very strong Māori aesthetic, And that's the first time I'd ever seen it. And I was just absolutely blown away. They were beautiful pattern drafters and machinists, and they kind of took me under their wing. And I was 14 years old at the time, and I just remember being like, what is this world? You know, fashion shows and shoots, and just watching people sew these garments that I'd never ever seen before in any retail outlet ever. And I was just so inspired. And so I started to just tutu at home and just sew and sew and sew. And I think, you know, practice and mistakes, loads and loads of mistakes, you just learn and you keep growing. And then Kim Fraser, they ended up closing down their business. And she came and found me when I was in my 7th form year 13. I was, I think, probably 3 months out from graduation, and she said, I'm starting a fashion course and you need to be on it. I went, sweet, left school, went and studied straight under her and Maria at the time, and loved it, fell hapu, 18 years old, had my eldest son, so I couldn't finish that course. And then 1 year later, or Ashley was 1 year old, and she found me again. I don't even know how she found me, because there was no Facebook or internet back then, but she found me and she said, we're starting the first fashion and design course at Manukau Tech. It's in the Z block, and we've got some amazing tutors out there. It'll be a degree in visual arts, but you'll major in fashion. I went, sweet. Put Ashley into our daycare out there and did that 3-year degree. And our tutors were like Arnold Manaki Wilson, and Lisa Reihana. And, you know, we were so lucky to have this incredible group of creatives and artists teaching and sharing with us. We had no idea at the time, none of us, but I learned so much through that time. Yeah.
And Māori influences as well, Arnold Manaki Wilson, Lisa Reihana.
Strong
that
Māori
Māori aesthetic.
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you think at the time this could be, that's what I need to hold on to, that the Māori aesthetic is really important? What were you thinking at the time when you were going through that course? And
well, when I had Ashley, because we'd been completely cut off from my grandfather's side and my nanny's side as well, which is Tainui, as soon as I fell pregnant, you know, I just had that. I needed to know more so that he would grow up knowing more, and unlike me, would not grow up feeling like lost and like wanting or knowing that there was something there that you were part of, but you couldn't quite understand it or reach it, or you didn't know anyone to go to sort of like help you along your way in that space. And so from the day he was born, I started down that path and went back home and went back to the marae and Urupa and talked to whānau and that about everything that you need to know, you know, and baby steps at that stage. So by the time, you know, Ashley was a year old and I started that course, I based the entire degree on my Māori whakapapa, and it was all a learning journey during that 3-year space. And it was a really hard 3 years. 37 of us started that degree and 5 of us graduated. The attrition rate was really high. So I just kind of thought I had nothing to really give Ashley. I hadn't finished college and I hadn't finished that course, and I was like, there's no way that I'm not passing this. And so, yeah, the knowledge and the design development, the exposure to other creatives, the exposure to the Māori students that were there at the time, and they were mean. They were just amazing. They were handing in their assignments in full te reo and so forth, and they were like, market. You know, an establishment that wasn't really set up for that at the time. And they changed things and they opened my eyes to a lot of things. I got a lot of learning from them.
what was the response from people when they saw the Māori aesthetic? Based on the learning you were undertaking at the time in your own journey, what was the response to what you were doing?
Well, I think at that time there were a lot of us that were in that space, and even people that had knowledge were still trying to break into a contemporary, it's almost like a contemporary movement. And of course that had been paved by, you know, so many incredible Māori artists before us that really took the brunt of that I suppose, that shift and in development. And we went down and spent some time with Toiho Kura and Gizzy, and I was ready just to, pack up everything and move down to Gisborne for like the rest of my life and just learn under them. That was incredible learning, and they were so beautiful. They manaki'd us like, they were such good people. And at that time, way back then, Toiho Kura was new. And so all of the art that was coming out of there, along with the knowledge base, was something that was revolutionary at that time. So I was really lucky to be a part of those different shifts and so forth. So the response in general, actually across the board as far as other creatives and so forth were concerned, was really positive. However, from a faculty perspective, not as positive.
What was their response? What were they doing that was making it clear they weren't positive about what was going on?
Well, I know, and it still happens now within all of the learning institutions, is that the mainstream fashion industry, there's no real space for Māori fashion. I know that sounds harsh, but Māori fashion is basically thought of as a tokenistic tourism shirt with a koru on it or so forth, or it's art. So there's never been this space in the middle that has been acceptant of a very strong Māori aesthetic in high-end fashion. So from the tutors' perspective, I think it's almost like their way of protecting you. They're like, you can't do that because you're never going to get a business, you're never going to be able to get off the ground. And also, in a lot of places, they don't know how to mark. How can they mark something that they don't understand? So I got failed for this one particular, it was a silk dress, and I basically hand sewn on kōwhaiwhai and so forth and Māori design, and I got failed hard on it. And I was like, man, I love this, and I love the whakaaro behind it. So I entered it into the Apple Computer Creative Youth Awards at the time, which was a massive one back then, won the Women's Wear section and won the Supreme Award with that. And that was like, all right, okay, I need to keep in mind that when people are judging you or assessing you on things, it's from their perspective, not everyone's perspective. So, yeah.
But you said it's ongoing now, and we're going to come into further on in discussion some of the other issues that are happening in the fashion industry now. But you're saying in the educational institutions that still occurs, where Māori art, Māori aesthetic is not marked, reviewed, I guess, for want of a better way of putting it, in a favourable way. How can that still be the case?
I know. I know. It's insane. It's crazy. So I've had a lot of third-year students come and do their internship with me, and they're usually Māori or Pacifica. And so I've heard all these stories of it's basically soul-crushing, I think, because what they're being told, to simplify it, what they're being told is there is no place for this within the fashion industry. There's just no place for it, so there's no point. What you need to do is base your aesthetic or strive towards this if you ever want to make it in the industry. And there's just some incredibly talented Māori and Pacifica designers out there, students and so forth coming through, and you can see how they've started in the first year and they're just full of ideas and full of life and energy and creativity, and that's slowly been just smashed out of them, and their confidence is usually, by the time they're in the third year, it's usually at an all-time low, and I find it heartbreaking, but it also enrages me. We have one Māori student who's just finishing his PhD now, and he's been so intelligent in the way that he's manoeuvred his aesthetic, because his inspiration comes from his mama and his kuia, and seeing them in the kitchen and on the marae and so forth. And so the aesthetic is of queer, really. And you can feel it and see it as soon as you see his collection, and you can see it and feel it in all of his brand and all of his branding and so forth. However, he's delivered it in a way that the faculty and mainstream can understand it and hear it and see it. So he's been very, very intelligent in his delivery. However, he shouldn't have had to have been.
So it's vitally important that you keep being successful.
I think it's vitally important that that I create a community and a place of support, because we've never had that. So as far as you can go back, if you think of any Māori fashion designers, they've been speckled across the country and very isolated, and there's never been a time or a place where we've all come together as a community with a focused vision. We've come together and done shows and these sorts of things, and everyone sort of comes, loves each other, and then leaves. But what we have never had is a place of support, a place where students, emerging designers, established designers can come and say, I need help finding a machinist, I need help finding a pattern drafter, where can I get this manufactured? Does anyone know of a printer? Because everyone's come up in a mainstream mentality of, protecting your patch. You've worked hard to find this information and you're not going to share it with anyone because the marketplace is so small and it's so competitive that you don't want anyone else to get an edge over you. And it's awful. It's just an awful way of living and being. And so the most important thing is that we firstly create this safe space that also allows everyone to come in and be celebrated for bringing their unique Māori voice. And once that base is formed, then we can start really focusing on export, or just national sales, to be perfectly honest. There's not one place in New Zealand that you can go to specifically find Māori fashion. So you go to any country in the world, Hawaii or any of the islands, Japan, and the first thing that you will see is that country's offering of souvenirs and their fashion offering. Anywhere in the world, but not New Zealand. And that has to change. And also, I'm not talking about, a printed T-shirt. I'm talking about beautifully crafted fashion.
Was that the ultimate purpose that led you to start your company in, I think, 2008, 2007, 2000?
We won the Supreme Award at Star Pacifica in 2008, and my beautiful grandmother was there, 85 years of age, very, very, very sick, and didn't live much longer after that. And that was the turning point for us. And so at that time, it was a very emotive reaction. It was like, oh my God, we just won the Supreme. This is like the biggest, blah, 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 blah. In New Zealand, we should start a label. And we Jason and I high-fiving each other. We're like, we should totally start a label. Let's start a label. Awesome. We had no idea. We had no idea about business. We had, I had not sewn or even pattern drafted really for 15, 16 years. And we had no idea how the manufacturing structure, we're so green, so green. So I went and did a TPK business course. So I was like, I need to know something. And on that TPK course in 2010, they registered the business. So I was like, okay, cool. Yep, I'll register the business. Okay, awesome. And so we didn't start trading for 2 years after that because we were still learning what the flipping heck we were doing. And I do believe that the whole journey has been quite an organic development. One thing has led to another thing and another thing. People have shut us down here or shut us down here, so we've moved over here and under here. And through that journey, and also the prior 15 years of doing competitions, outside of my full-time work at the time, it gave me a very honest experience with how Māori and Pacifica fashion was portrayed in New Zealand. And I experienced and talk to other fellow creatives who had gone through being treated a certain way, where you're asked to do a show for an organisation or an event or so forth to give the wow factor, but you're the one who's put in all of the putia, all of the time and so forth. You don't get paid to come and do it. You basically get brought in through the back door, you put on your show, and you get out through the back door. And that happened, and still happens now in some cases, like for years and years and years. And so all these little things that have been happening throughout that time just never really felt, it just felt awful. You know, it sits in your puku and you're like, this is not right. Like, none of this is right. The non-sharing environment, seeing Māori come to New Zealand Fashion Week and leave their Māori at the door and turn into something else because they think that that's the only way that they're going to survive or make it in this mainstream model that is not a right fit for us. So from my perspective, we need to make our own model. And we need to not worry so much about what we might miss out on in this market, and we need to go to the biggest market in the world so that worrying about selling it, that is taken out of the equation, and we can just be who we are and help each other along the way. And then, yeah.
How did the industry respond when you started your own company? Because you were at the vanguard of something that no one really knew what you were doing, really.
Yeah, no. It's like telling someone or reading someone a story tale for the first time over and over and over and over and over again. And because there was no reference points, there'd never been a high-end fashion label that was not only run by Māori but had a completely Māori aesthetic. There'd just never been one, so people didn't understand it. And so they'd try and break it up because we had 3 products, the contemporary weaving, the Pounamu and the clothing. So they'd try and break it up and put it into the boxes that they felt it fit. And we were like, well, no, this is one brand. And the reason being is that it's one story and it comes from one place, and that's Te Ao Māori. So if you don't stock it all and tell the story appropriately, then that's fine, we'll sell it ourselves. So we've never had a stockist. We got one stockist. In 2012. So after 2 years of trying to figure out what the heck was going on, we got one stockist. It was on High Street. We were so excited. It was with these other, well-known labels, and we were in there for 2 weeks. And one of the most well-known labels that was in there went to the owner and said, you either remove that Māori label or we're pulling. And so this was a new boutique on High Street. They needed the well-known labels to get the foot traffic in and everything, so we were let go. So I was like, what? what the hell's going on here? So I was like, right, if this is going to keep happening, we need to find different ways of getting to our market. Who do we want to be our market? And so I just sort of focused on corporate, government, and entertainment. And over a 6-year period, while we're now like dressing the Prime Minister and the Governor General, Beyonce,
Demi Lovato, Mariah Carey,
President Barack Obama.
Yeah.
So all of these things having that shut down and having those doors closed in the beginning was good. Those what seemed like failures at the time was great because we had to think outside the box on how we were going to go about conducting ourselves. So we went 100% online, and that's where Walt Disney found us, online. And so these things have happened because we weren't accepted into that space. And then conversations have changed over the years, and that's due to a lot of things. Trump being appointed, the wonderful thing, the only thing that's wonderful about him being appointed was the conversations and the action-based purposes that have come out of that happening, and a lot of those have trickled down into us. And we're having lots of conversations here now in New Zealand that we never had before, and that's happening in the fashion industry as well.
I'm trying to get a sense of the reaction and what drove you to keep going in the face of that kind of adversity of the industry essentially trying to shut you down, for want of a better way of putting it, trying to get you out. What kept you going? What is the motivating force that kept pushing you ahead?
My husband will tell you this. I'm very stubborn and I don't like bullies.
And where does that come from?
GI. Yeah, I have a real sense of justice. And so when people are being told, or when I'm being told that I can't do something that seems really, really unjust to me, it makes me want it much, much, much stronger. And yeah, I'm very stubborn like that. And also, at the very early stages, it was just about being like, you can't tell me that I can't do something. It feels right. I know that it's right. And I know that if we just stick at this, the only time that we'll fail is if we give up. And so I've been so lucky that Jason is my husband, that he's the guy that's just been the sounding board and this other like incredible creative that we can speak really honestly and really passionately, and there's lots of yelling and so forth. And it just wouldn't have happened if it hadn't have been for that relationship. And him consistently saying, at the end of the day, keep going. And also, you have to keep going because I want to quit my job and come work for you. I want to be a stay-home dad, look after our kids. That's my dream job. And so there's been these little things, but mainly it's just been Jace. And just that, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Does that bring a strain on your own personal relationship, marriage, about it being in business together and all the trials and tribulations?
Yeah. No, I think what we learned really early on is that the most important thing to do is figure out what our roles are, because we were banging heads for ages, those first 2-3 years. And what it really was is that we hadn't identified what my roles were and what his roles were. And once we did, it was smooth sailing for a while. And then we started to develop and grow into these other spaces. And so we needed to take on different roles again. And we started banging heads again. We started banging heads again. And so it came back to, again, identifying what those roles are. But the cool thing with Jace is that we can have a massive scrap, just scrap it out. And that's how we process. We're like, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine, yeah. All right, yeah, no, you're right. Or no, you're right. And it just, we've figured out our rhythm. And we always know that we're going to be fine at the end of that. So it's just, I don't know, it's just that it's a very real and honest kind of love.
Was that confidence there when you started the business immediately after a global financial crisis? At a time when the industry was trying to shut you out? Were you pretty confident you were still going to get through it at that time, or were you still in development in that process at that time?
Of course, yeah, we were still in development back then, and also, there was no capital and there was no putia. So there were times when we asked ourselves if we were being irresponsible parents. Should I just go out and get a 9-to-5 job so that financially we're in a better position right now? And we had those conversations a couple of times, but it was, we never had we're just going to quit. We're just going to give up. We always had in the back of our minds that it had to become a success. It had to move into some kind of successful space so that our children could grow up in that and understand the reality of entrepreneurialism, of what it was to just believe in something so passionately and give your everything to it, what it was to grow up in that and be a part of that crazy world and so forth. I mean, my kids hate going to fashion shows. And they're like, not another one. And sit there on their phones probably most of the time. But what they have learned is what work ethic is and what it is for a husband and a wife to love each other and have each other's back. And so I'm quite, I don't say this very often, but I'm quite proud of what they would have learnt just by inadvertently being there for the journey. And so that's always been the driving force the driving inspiration. And then whenever you have a successful outcome, and however that looks, it's always like, how did the kids see that? Or what did the kids learn from that? Or I hope they're proud, or I hope that they feel good, and I hope that makes them feel a sense of confidence in who they are and where they're coming from.
How were you able to deal with all those challenges when you're an 18-year-old mother going into a 3-year design course?
That was, again, it comes down to the same thing. It was a really, really hard time there, actually. But I was just so adamant that I had to have something to show for my son. The whole driving force behind anything back there was Ashley. It was like, right, so when he grows up, he needs to have all of these things that I didn't, or I need to protect him and guide him in ways that I probably wasn't. And so the whole driving force was like, I must come out of this and have a piece of paper to say that I'd actually achieved something, so that I can go on to the next thing, so that he can be better provided for.
Tell me when there's been a moment where something has happened and you've thought, by the way, it's ironic because I can hear motorbikes going past, it's just speedway racer mates. Tell me when there's been a moment where you've thought, we've done it, I've done it.
Oh, I've never thought that.
Never?
Never.
Despite all the highlights in your career, despite Beyonce and Demi Lovato and Harry and Meghan and...
No. Actually, probably a time that was more impactful than any of those. And again, I acknowledge the fact that that was a great privilege and a great opportunity. But one of the more sort of real moments was a young boy called Dookie King has 90% third-degree burns over his body, and he had been nominated for... oh my gosh, I can't remember what the awards were now, but it was basically because of his incredible positive reaction and way of living to something that had happened to him. And he has 11 brothers and sisters, and they live in this small, rural, like probably no blimmin' internet sort of like access town, and he had to come up to Auckland. And the awards event would only pay for him and his mum to come. And we got wind of this through one of our mates, and we were like, right, we've got to be able to do something about that. So we put a little campaign together and raised enough money to bring his entire whānau up, and got in touch with, the Warriors and all these different people, and they did all these things while they were up in Tamaki. And we gifted him Korowai and Kākahu and Pounamu, and that was far more moving to me and Jason than any of the others.
Because you do a lot of charity work now, don't you? How important is that in your work career and what you do to help keep driving you forward, both you and Jason? Yeah,
I just think whenever you're given an opportunity, the responsibility of that opportunity is to make sure that it's passed on, or it's used to help other people move or shift. And so what I found probably 5 years into it was that I was spreading myself far too thin over all these different things, because I just wanted to help in every way that we could. And we had to become far more focused. And I had to become a lot better at saying no to things. Jason had to become a lot better at saying no to things. And what we've ultimately... or what I've personally ultimately focused myself on is that I have a Dream Charitable Trust, which I've sat on the board of since it began, and that supports basically the whole child and their education over 13 years. And there's like 1,500 kids from Decile 1 schools up in Whangarei, and so from my perspective, I'll always be a part of that. Super diverse woman, because we've never had that space before, where like some of the most influential women of diversity have actually come together and formed a community, and they're like, right, okay, because nobody's been talking to each other, let's just start talking to each other, and let's start, lifting everyone, and also inviting people into this space to start lifting everyone in this space, because everyone has experienced some kind of racism or sexism or so forth. So these are the people that you can talk to about it, and these are the ways that we can positively start moving into different ways of making that space better and easier for everyone that's coming through. And then, of course, Kāhui, forming Kāhui Fashion Collective, that's my baby. Yeah, that's that's our sixth child. And that is about creating a fashion industry, Māori fashion industry for the very first time. We've never had it in our country's history, and it's so needed. It's so it's time, and so I basically given everything to try and create that space so that the whole, every single Māori fashion designer out there knows that they have somewhere that they can go, and it's a safe space, and it's going to help them project their career or their creativity or whatever it is that they want to do if they want the help. They don't have to, but if they want it, it's there for the first time.
It seems to me, and this is just based on this conversation that you and I are having, that what you do in terms of product and the people that you meet, in terms of famous people around the world, are just a way in which you can achieve these, what I'll call, almost higher purpose objectives that you have around contributing back to community, setting up kāhui, enabling access for other people who come into the industry to be able to sell what they do, their own Māori aesthetic, their own items out into the world. How important is that for you going forward to keep doing? Is that the higher priority for you now in your work life?
Yeah, I love that you get me, and because you got me so quickly, we're going to be friends forever. Yeah, you nailed it. All those other things are just basically, they allow us to have a louder voice and more influence to be able to do what I would consider to be the real mahi, which of course is not about us or our business or what we're doing. It's about how do we make sure that everybody else gets the same opportunities, and how do we do that in a way that they feel safe? And so, yeah, you nailed it.
What do your children think about that? Because I suspect, and maybe they're more well-rounded individuals than children I might know in my life, but what do they make of the fact that that's of more import to you than Moana, Beyonce, Demi Lovato, da-da-da-da-da?
They're the same. They're totally the same.
Okay, so how were you able to do that? Just so I can pick it up.
They just, because we don't put much emphasis on those sorts of things, and we put a lot of emphasis on these sorts of things, they just think that that's how it is, and that's normal. So I don't think they even know about some of this stuff. Yeah, those aren't even things that we really talk about at home. Someone might go up to them and say, hey, does your mum and dad like da-da-da-da-da? And they're like,
hey?
I think so. I don't know. And then they just get on with their day, So for them, or for us as parents, like we keep saying to each other, and mate, we fail all the time, right? Sometimes we just sit there and we're like, what are we doing wrong?
Why didn't I stick to Speedway?
Why didn't we just have 2 kids? Why did we have 5? We have these conversations all the time. About the fact that the most important thing to us is raising good humans, like just good humans that are happy and they do the best they can at whatever it is that they love doing, and that they are always good to other people. And that's what I mean, like sometimes you feel like, I'm failing, because it's a process, isn't it? There's no handbook for parenting, but that's the thing that's most important to us. So we never even talk about those. Yeah, they know that I have to go away sometimes. They're like, where are you going? I'm like, I've got to go up to America. Why? Well, because I'm doing this thing with this, movie Moana. But why? How long is it? And then we got a big commission order just before I went up. Oh, no, this is another time. One of the times I had to go up to the States, I was awarded an IVLP for women in entrepreneurship, and that was good learning too. That was 48 women from 48 different countries in the world that came together, and the majority of them were actually Indigenous women. It was amazing. And incredible networks with these Indigenous women all over the world that basically in one way or another really came from the same kind of mindset and mould. But the way I kind of sold that to the kids, because they had to go away for 3 weeks, was that we got a big commission order. I did like literally 3 months of all-nighters for this weaving, just up weaving, so that we could take them up to Disneyland. And for us, that was like a bucket list. That was something that like 9 years ago, we were like, oh man, if we won lotto, we'd love to take the kids up and do that. And so those are moments, like when you were talking before about, you know, I've made it, I've done it. Those were moments that were like, I never thought this would happen, and this is so cool. But the kids were completely oblivious to any of the mahi stuff. They were just like, oh, this is whānau time. And so what had inadvertently happened there was that something that we had started to create 8 years ago that people were saying was not a viable business or product had gotten to the point where we could do the mahi that other people couldn't, be commissioned and monetize for it to the point where we could do something with our whānau that we never thought that we would be able to do. So that was a nice full circle learning. But yeah, the kids, they're oblivious. Just nothing. All they care about is if life's happy, it's all good. Yeah. If mama and papa are happy, if they're happy, then that's basically how the house rolls. But they're like us. There's heaps of yelling. It's a really loud house. Jason's deaf. He's got like hearing aids and so forth. So the TV's up loud, the music's up loud, we all speak loud. It's nuts.
What was you kept referencing back to GI and the importance of being brought up in GI and what GI as a community taught you. What does GI say to you now?
I love going back home. I love just going to the pack and save, because that's where you always meet up with everyone and you sort of bump into everyone. And one of my most favourite things to do these days is someone will have a birthday or there'll be some kind of celebration or whatever that means that all the olds are going to get together. And that's still some of my most favourite time, because in our industry and with certain relationships that are developed, it's a different kind of space. And I feel like a lot of the time when I'm at outings or whatever, it's mahi. Whereas whenever I go back to GI, that just feels real and it feels like home, and nobody gives a shit about what you're doing or who you know or whatever. They're just like, just be you. Yeah.
Let's talk about the next big challenge. You've talked about kāhui. I suspect there might be a challenge in and around an Indigenous collective as well, particularly for Indigenous women. What's the next big challenge, though, in your mind, potentially the impossible dream that you might want to achieve?
Well, because I started this in 2017, I've had 2 years of hitting walls. And I feel now that people are open to the conversation, and not just open to the conversation, but also the relationships that have been developed throughout China and also here in New Zealand. There's support there now, and people get it. They not only just get it, they want it to succeed, and they want to see this idea come to life, which is wonderful. So I think we're in good stead at the moment as far as projecting in the right direction is concerned. The fear or the challenge is in how successfully the marketplace like consumerism happens. Like we can create these brands, we can lift them to a certain level. The brand stories will be authentic and also respectful and delivered in the right way. However, when you put it out into the marketplace, you just don't know until you're out there. So I think the scary part in all of this is not the building of it, not at all, because I know everyone's got the goods, you know, and they've got the work ethic, they've got the ahua, and I'm excited about that. The scary bit is just knowing how the market's going to receive in New Zealand and then in China. And China's just this, it's just this whole other beast, and all these different parts of China are completely different as well, and how you get into market. And how we maintain our IP, how we protect ourselves in that space is another whole thing. How we make sure that we're working with the right people and that we've got sustainable relationships, not just flash in the pan relationships to try and get the sale or whatever. Our focus is much longer. It has to be so that everyone that's coming through has a space to go to. So, yeah, I don't feel too much fear about it. And any of the challenges that come up through conversations or people like not being open or receptive of the vision, I just don't, those things just, I'm just, okay, that one's not going to work, all right, we'll go and we'll work over here and we'll talk to these people, and you get to learn how to read where we're going to be safe and where we might look to take a risk and just navigate it as we go, and where we just absolutely would not go.
Does it concern you that the world is in an interesting place? Trump could blow it up in seconds. China's going through a trade war. The UK is going to go wherever the UK goes, depending on how Brexit happens. Yeah. The world market is potentially going to change. The OCR, New Zealand's dropped. Yeah. Does that kind of thing keep you awake at night?
No, it doesn't keep me awake at night. I have no control over that. I only have control over how I conduct myself and what I create here. So although it's always essential to be aware of everything that's going on and to be aware of all the different relationships, especially political relationships that are going on, what's happening within China at the moment, their social structure, how much that's changing at the moment and developing, those things are important to know, but at the end of the day, I can't control that. So I don't let it into my space. I'd be more concerned if my son comes home with a bad report. That'd keep me up at night. So yeah, I just kind of try and focus on what I can influence.
What does keep you awake at night, aside from the potential son with a bad report? Just recently, I suppose, what it's been is that I've put so much time into kahui for the last year that I haven't had time to create a new collection for our business. And so our business has probably taken a hit for the last 12 months so that I can concentrate on trying to get this thing off the ground. And it's not so much that it keeps me awake at night, but I just can't wait. I can't wait to create something fresh and new. And both of us are quite excited about that. We've got a 10-year arts project that we've been working on now that will launch next year. And that's going to mean a lot of mahi, creative mahi, which excites me no end. We're looking to take kahui over to show as the first New Zealanders at Shanghai Fashion Week in April 2020. You know, there's APEC coming over, Te Matatini, in the year after and so forth. So there's so many things that are coming up that are important to be prepared for, that if anything keeps me awake, it's the excitement of creating for that, creating physical garments, kākahu, but also opportunities for everyone to collectively just go out and celebrate all the mahi. I have to say, it's not bad for a girl who was a speedway racer who grew up in GI. I thank you very much for coming to talk to us. Thank you very much for giving us our time. I would say good luck, but I don't think I need to. So kia hora te moana, kia whakapapaunamu te moana, kia hora te marino, kia te reta ka rohi rohi, kia tautarangi Māori. Thank you for your time.
Kia ora.